Season 4, Episode 3, Rites of Passage. Sara provokes thought on rites of passage by asking, what are we holding back onto in work and education simply because of a social construct established by rite of passage? She wonders whether those with power to make changes can support the redesign of teaching. Trajce reflects on the way that WhyWork Podcast considers case law and realities of life, or the non-vanilla spice of life that challenges conventions. Alan, Trajce and Sara dissect rites of passage in social systems that diminish others. Hello and welcome to the WhyWork Podcast series. You are listening to Trajce Vitkovsky, Sara Pizzell and Alan Girl.
You were talking about hooking into it.
Yes, I love the chili dark Lindt chocolate.
But not vanilla?
No, nothing wrong with vanilla, don't get me wrong. Right. However, I do prefer a little bit of spice.
I love that dark chocolate with sea salt or caramel
that's what I'm talking
and
about.
chili.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
Ain't nothing vanilla about that.
Do you remember
mate.
that movie Chocolat and that beautiful...
Oh, lovely movie.
Julianne Binoche. Yes, love that movie, right? And that was a young Johnny Depp then too.
And that's what our podcast's about. It's not about
Johnny Depp.
The Spice of Life.
It could be about Johnny Depp. Yeah, great actor.
Spice of Life, right?
No, it's about non-vanilla podcasts, and that's what we're about.
Non-vanilla. All right. Can we talk about something that we just started to talk about offline a little bit, and that was about professional rites of passage. It's something I've been curious about because I've had some experiences, and I work for several universities. That's my other work around my consultancy and research project work, and I'm curious about the way education occurs. Now, in my research work, let me preface this, I've been looking at this CHIP model, the communication that transpires to human information processing, right? What is the message you want to communicate? What's the mode of that communication? How is it attended to? How is the information received and processed? And what sort of behaviors do you expect to come from that? When you start to really pull that out from a human factors perspective, it really helps you understand, what's the elicitation of knowledge when you work with subject matter experts, and what's the transfer of knowledge, and what behaviors do you expect to happen? I love this. I'm pulling this apart for some current research in mining. And because of that, and because of what I do with different universities, I was confronted recently by some exams where I was, a participant in helping to assess students. So I do little projects with different unis, and I just agreed to help assess some students. It was an oral exam. It was a healthcare topic. I work in health, business, law, human factors, different subjects, different unis. And this was for healthcare students. And it was a situation where the healthcare students had to recall some pretty intensive neurology learnings. And it was no books, walk-in, oral exam across the table with a video camera going and with just a blank piece of paper. And from their last, 9 or 10 weeks of learnings, I had a list of questions, randomized computer-generated questions. And if you were the student coming in, I would invite you in the room, explain how things were going to unfold, and boom, there's a stopwatch, set an amount of time, and I have these random questions to pull, so you would have had to prepare as much as you can from absolutely everything.
Okay, let me get this straight. I'm flashing back to my father was telling me at his final, they used to call that matriculation.
Yes.
He said there was a hat, literally a hat. And there were 10 questions in there scrunched into...
Harry Potter and the hat, the sorcerer's hat.
Scrunched into paper, and you pluck out the topic.
Exactly, that. But
I'm talking the 50s.
Yeah. So it felt archaic to me, okay? And I was confronted by this because I ran out of tissues. Why? Because students would break down and cry, right? And it really challenged me to think about, what are we holding on to that's simply an old rite of passage that as professors, as lecturers, we're just used to because, boy, it was tough when we did it, so it should be tough now. And is that really the best way to assess performance? And is that really indicative of graduate attributes once somebody graduates? Are they ever going to have to recall spontaneously the medulla, and are they going to have to look at the spinothalamic pathway? Are they going to, right in the heat of the moment, are they going to have to recite this with myelination and sheaths, What do people really need to know to do their job well and effectively? And is that the behavior you need to elicit by testing in that way? So that's always in the back of my mind, the human factors aspects in instructional design, course design, right?
Okay.
And the experience, what impact is that really going to have? And I look at workplace education, I deliver workplace education, and it's hard to be, perfect in all cases, but I'm just curious about it. It's one of my many things I'm curious about. And if I have a group of students who seem like lovely people, right? Healthcare professions seem to attract some very lovely people when they first come into the profession, the stereotypes. And these people are breaking down in tears because it's like they might have studied in that hat that you mentioned. 99%, they get that one ticket that wasn't the thing that they were most familiar or comfortable with. Boom, and they're tested oral live with a video camera, and the stress of that can just be too much.
Do you think the reason why that model is presented is because of, given that it's a health sector work, that simply this, and Alan, I'd like to hear your thoughts on this too, it's character building, Sarah. Suck it up. It's
Suck
tough
it up,
love.
deal with it. We're going to have to deal with tough events, and you're going to have to be prepared. Right, so that
blood on the
might
floor,
be an argument.
Prepared for screaming.
Right. This is what it takes.
Yelling.
But let's wind this back. The reality is we have a shortage of skilled workers in healthcare, and will do for the next 20 years, right? I've had healthcare organizations say, hey, our CEO just talked about the shortage of nursing staff for the next 3 years. And I said, wow, that was short-sighted. And they go, what do you mean? I said, I'm sorry, I can't help but, I don't hold my tongue very well. So it was like, it's not 3 years. There's no panacea in 3 years. It is a World Health Organization problem noted for the next 20 years globally. So we have to prepare to be under-resourced. So how are we going to be smart about work design given that scenario? So going back to education, is this just a rite of passage that we've inherited? Like, I found a nice article here from, it's from Walter Benjamin, The Awesome Journey, Rites of Passage in Medical Education, okay? And in this, he talks about medical school. The first 2 years are simply survival, right? So think about that. We're going to test you to see who survives, right?
Again, could it be part of this? We're toughening you up.
We're toughening you up for the reality, and I hear that. You got to deal with specialists and surgeons. It's all tough love, right? I hear that. Is that really conducive to the way we need to be empathetic and support somebody's real learning, right? And I'm just questioning. I'm just putting this out there. Then they talk about suffering and death. That's a rite of passage. Your patient contact, you need to have experienced suffering and death. Abuse. This is what you're talking about. Medical student as a victim, grandstanding. There's ego, there's abuse, there's tales of woe. Because when I had to deal with a specialist, there was this ego abuse, so you should get used to it too, right? Rite of passage. The house of God, where you should be used to working an all-nighter. Hey, right? That's just a rite of passage. Forget about the fatigue and psychosocial harm that can arise from this experience, right? So do we override some of these conventions that we're being told should be adhered to just because it's a rite of passage in a profession, right? Hey, and there's this other ego-driven in medical education. People rely on me to save lives, right? So this gets perpetuated. The dark night of soul, that's a good term, right? The dark night of soul. And that's when, as a rite of passage, there's a period of time among medical practitioners, at least according to this article, that there may be some fragmentation and suddenly a loss of meaning. The whole reason that you went into medical school to help others gets challenged because you start asking, what am I devoting my life to, all my skills and my energy? And you're getting close to now burnout, and your medical colleagues who you valued lose their halos, right? They become real people, and you see this term, they've got feet of clay, or you start to see their real character flaws, right? They're no longer gods. Now, you talked about knowledge, power, and truth, that triad.
Yeah.
And surgeons was one of the cohorts you spoke about.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. So suddenly a surgeon, there was a time, and particularly, Alan, in workers' compensation claims and matters where the surgeon would simply take a view, or the orthopedic surgeon writing the reports would say, oh, he's a malingerer. And then that would be taken as gospel. Malingerer, I love that word, malingerer. But now, of course, that level of power or godlike cogency doesn't hold. But there was a time when, if the doctor says malingerer, must be a malingerer. Bludger.
a bludger. Right?
Do you remember that, Alan? There was that, certainly that.
I do. That sort of thing still exists a bit.
Yeah.
And this came up when you start to see these character flaws in people that you've appreciated. It comes from witnessing this sense of privilege and conservatism in this profession versus the intent to support those who are marginalized. The whole reason you thought that you were possibly getting into a medical profession. You see people build professional armor, and when we talked about your benevolence eroding, you lose empathy when you're so tired and burnt out and overworked, right? So you start to see that, is it a sensitivity versus personal resilience in a bad system, right? Good people who fail in bad systems, poorly designed systems.
You can apply to all professionals, though. It's not just about the doctors.
No.
I'm thinking.
I'm curious about rites of passage, right? So I'm talking about in healthcare now, from the education to the workplace. Like as simple as in the workplace, I remember going out as a young healthcare professional, and if you worked in a hospital setting, you had to eat the porridge. That's a rite of passage. Your first lunch, you're invited to the cafeteria, and you got to eat the porridge, right? That's simply a rite of passage.
Ritual part of that. Yeah, but certainly I'm thinking of the legal profession.
Tell me about that, guys.
It's changed a lot over the years.
So what's some traditional, conventional rites of passage and I say law fraternity, we were talking about that, and then I questioned myself because that sounds very patriarchy. It sounds very male, masculine. I certainly don't mean that, but it's old vernacular that I have from the US,
well,
right?
Historically it would have, because women were not allowed to practice and so on.
They weren't allowed in pubs in Australia when I was a kid. Goodness, my mom talks about that, right?
Absolutely, but certainly, so legal profession now.
Legal profession 50-50, to be more inclusive of whoever's practicing. So what are the rites of passage in a legal profession?
I think a lot of them have disappeared. A lot of the things that were around when I was a first-year lawyer, you used to have things like the article clerk would be made to wash the partner's cars or
shut up.
sent to
Are
the
you
shop
serious?
presents for
What?
normally in those days was the wife. There were other things that'd be sent on running around the city delivering non-existent parcels. All sorts of stuff.
Wait, explain that one to me.
Oh yeah, I'll tell you. I had an experience.
Yeah, go on.
I was 17, still wasn't even 18. First year of everything, 17, and I was told to deliver the oral agreement forms in a manila envelope, in a yellow envelope. So from the courthouse to the police station, which was up the road in Ipswich. Now, oral agreement, that in itself is reasonably oxymoronic, but when you're a 17-year-old first-year clerk, you do as you're told. All formal. There was a registrar who asked me to do this, and I sealed it, and of course people were sniggering. I had no idea what's going on. I'm freaking out. Going to the police the first time in official business to deliver the oral agreement form, and I rang the bell.
Yes.
Hey, what are you here? Yeah, I'm so I'm from the courthouse. I'm here to deliver the oral. Oh, and then they made a big issue. So then, no, you need to speak to Constable so-and-so. So I'll sort of give it a bit of a runaround. It's part of the game, part of the ruse, part of the initiation. So then I said, we have to get that. So then they gave me another envelope from the police. This one was the police service envelope. Anyways, I had that, and this went on for about ages. So I ran back down, this time a lather of sweat. I think, I've got this right. And Ziggy was my nickname. That's another story.
Ziggy? Wait, Ziggy.
Yeah, because we were in the Battle of the Bands, and I was called David Bowie, Ziggy. So it was a bit of a... It was a good term. I love nicknames.
Bowie. All right,
Ziggy, did you bring the oral agreement?
Stardust, baby. All right.
Yeah, so there's a big ritual. Did you bring the oral agreement forms? Yes. And this is part of this rite of passage. Yeah, I did. And they said, well, you need to open it in the presence of a witness. And they made this huge ritual out of the whole thing. It's a rite of passage. They're all gathering around.
Are they snickering yet? Have you noticed them laughing yet?
They probably would have been.
You weren't
but
sure.
Of course,
you were so
I was
on
freaking
edge.
out. I'm thinking, because I'd gone to the police to swap the documents.
Yeah.
This is big. This is my first foray into the law.
You're right.
And I opened it up. And guess what was in it? Toilet paper.
Oh, shut up. Oh.
And it was funny. But it's generational, because my boss, the clerk of the court, he wasn't in on it. It was the deputy. They locked him in the safe. Back then, because you deal with the money and the mail, they locked him in for a few hours. He was in a safe.
And you don't know if he had claustrophobia or whatever, right?
So this is the type of stuff.
Okay, so it's a bit like hazing, isn't that the term? Hazing. You're made to do some humiliating or something inappropriate, and that's just another rite of passage.
Yeah. So they start early, you realise, but that's part of that character building, you see. And then,
I don't think it's character building.
Is it
no. For some people it is, but other people it's very traumatic. problematic, and I think that's why we've got rid of it.
And have we got rid of it though? That's what I'm talking. This can be subtle and it can be extreme. These rites of passage.
Have we got rid of it? Because Alan, so whilst those obvious things like you said about the car washing and me with the toilet paper, what I noticed, I'm a little bit younger than you. What I noticed was.
Thanks for that.
Did you notice that slide? He just slipped that right in there.
What I noticed was there was a different culture this time. It wasn't that obvious stuff which could be akin to hazing. It was more like, one article clerk, the old term, would say to the other article clerk, "Are you going?" "Yeah." "Oh, okay. So you're going early." It was 5 to 6.
Oh, so you're talking about, right. So in law, you hear that all the time. Who shows up first and who leaves last, right?
Yeah.
And there's some pride in being the first to the office and the last to leave.
And also that was built from the top down. Alan, am I...
So the culture, this is what we're talking about in terms of that tribal culture in an organization and what's unwritten and unspoken and yet still affects psychosocial well-being, right?
Yeah. I mean, 12 hours
causing harm with those expectations that are unwritten.
And it's really quite easy to design a workplace so that can't happen.
How? What are you thinking?
Computers just turn off. You just have a time when the computers switch off.
No, they don't.
Using laptops?
No, they don't do that, but you can do that.
No, computers don't turn off. I'm looking at my phone now. That's the problem. The computers don't turn off.
Technology is just becoming too advanced.
We're plugged in. We're a plug-in generation. So whilst your physical a desktop at work or home
might turn off,
bing, bing, blip, bloop, and that urge to go, what if Alan's sending me a full note about tomorrow? And you may not be, Alan, but what if you are? That's not disconnecting, and that's on challenging all the employers out there to have a good look at themselves. That part's not disconnecting. You know that whole right to disconnect, which is part now Fair Work Act's playing with that provision. You can formalise that, but people aren't turning off.
Look, I'm sure that there are rites of passage in so many industries. You can talk about mining, right? And some of the FIFO work and the shifts that you've done and the bravado that comes with that. You could talk about transportation and the long haul trips that you've made or not made. And you could talk about aviation. You could talk about military, right? You hear about all kinds of hazing experiences in military or in construction. I mean, go through the list.
So what do you do with your business, Sarah? What do you do? Because you work huge hours. So how do you make sure that your staff don't look at your example and say, I should be working huge hours?
Oh, yeah, it's absolutely a thing, isn't it, when you're talking about leading by example?
Yes.
And yet, I guess for me, I work and play and thread that outside of the conventions of your normal 8 to 5, which is far more acceptable now because of the pandemic where people can work odd hours. But I always have a little provision that, like even in my signature tag, it'll say something to the effect of, just because I'm working some strange weird hours, I'm not expecting you to respond to me immediately, da-da-da. There's like little disclaimers around my work things. And I have that conversation, the C word. I talk about that I am a sole parent and that I also enjoy my little fitness activities and things during days when other people may be working, and that I might work early morning and late night or do catch up on the weekend, and just because I do that, not expecting you to respond. So I have a conversation, and I think if nothing else, that's at least one aspect. And there are provisions now. You can put this into like Microsoft Outlook Teams where you can say send your emails and group send at 8 o'clock on Monday morning. So there are little technology provisions you can put about the communication systems in your calendar, your updates to people.
But do you walk the walk? Do you make sure? Have you had a conversation with yourself?
I love what I do, so I'm motivated in what I do, and I play well too.
Okay.
So I play well, I play hard, I work hard, and I always have. And I think trying to curtail that might not suit Sara.
Yeah.
That's just, it is who I am. It's how I function, and I go in waves with what I do. But I don't expect everyone else to have to do what I do. And
tell me if I'm wrong here. You have inbuilt capacitors. You have threshold points and limits where you know what? Stop.
Well, I'll tell you what, too. This thing I just spoke about earlier about the whole methylation of my folate and all the supplements I take that are not medicine-based, but I go for health-based, I can notice a big difference. That means I need to get out into nature and go get sunshine more. And so that's not necessarily a bad thing. as a forced regulator in life. Sometimes our own health impacts become our health regulators in life, right? I know, in fact, guys, we had our webinar, our drop-in session for WhyWork, and that was the day I had a face drop. That's when I woke up that day and had that face drop, and I actually said, I'm not putting my camera on. I had to actually hold my mouth to make my lips function for that thing, because I was not methylating my folate. Now that I know that was a thing, I didn't know that was a thing, and we were talking about healthcare topics in emergency room just before I went into that emergency room from our last discussion.
Yeah,
but it certainly wasn't a rite of passage. If you're asking me, going back to the theme, if I had a team member that said, my face kind of fell off today, I'd go, you don't have to do this webinar.
Yeah, that's right.
I would have no expectation that they did.
But it's more. It's because everyone's so busy. They've got their busyness going on. I don't think conversations are occurring around the water cooler, so to speak, about
rites of passage, cultural expectations.
Yeah, cultural expectations, more specifically. Rites of passage is one of them, and the hours are just there. As everyone's just so busy.
And it's a little bit about some of the mentoring we receive. So back to your earlier discussion about working from home, you know how it became increasingly a trend to make sure we had an experienced worker be a mentor to anyone else. It could be not an official boss, and in fact better if it wasn't, so that you had a mentor who didn't have any power disparity affecting your role, but you could assign someone as like the unofficial mentor. When you had I used to help prompt employees, but when you do, now you have this distributed workforce, are we still providing mentorship outside of the line of authority to support workers?
So the role of the mentor, and it's funny because a lot of people just simply don't know what a mentor is. I wouldn't mind talking about, reinvigorating, because certainly that's how we've been trained, and you're a senior
in lawyers, in the legal profession?
Yeah, a mentoring role. Certainly my experience has been in a mentoring role, and I provide mentorship. The role of the mentor, what do you think is missing in the workplace?
I do now with the distribution of work, right? I think that it certainly has an opportunity to make sure that's better formalized and recognized as a support to help understand and dismantle maybe some misinterpretations at work, some cultural expectations that can be challenged,
So what is a mentor?
What is a mentor, Alan?
Is it a buddy, or what is a mentor?
It's a bit of both, isn't it? It's someone who you respect in terms of their knowledge and experience.
Yeah.
Someone you can have confidential conversations with.
Yeah.
Someone that you can hopefully get wisdom and guidance from.
Yeah, and I feel missing some of that.
And can navigate some of the social relations at work as opposed to just a formal hierarchy, and the like I say, that tribal culture, and explain the operating rhythm and some of the soft skills support. So it's a less formal, but really important to how you function at work, is if you understand that who's got power in the organization might not always be an assigned role too, and sometimes you have to navigate those dynamics.
Mentoring to me certainly is that guidance. I think that struck me, because someone arrives first day at work, here's your handover, here's your key, here's your ID, the coffee room's down here, and so-and-so's there, and there'll be a morning tea later, and even if it's a formal morning tea to welcome you, most of the time it's not, but let's say there was, that's not mentoring.
Can I tell you guys about one time I had a situation where I sometimes contract long-term to organizations and almost work as though I'm embedded in an organization, and this was the case in this, shall we just say broadly, a construction firm. And my work is human factors and work design and innovation, etc. And I came in, the person who originally had interviewed me was no longer with the organization. I think that they were let go, right? There were months of delay before I was embedded into the organization. When I showed up, nobody really knew what to do with me. They didn't have a reporting line established. Somebody who I became friends with helped me organize my personal protective equipment and how I was supposed to get that to go out on site.
And
right?
This is random, though.
Randomly, we just found each other, so we became buddies and a self-assigned mentor, right? Helped me find a desk to use for when I was in that organization. It was so discombobulated, not organized, not structured. But at the same time, so I had that support. And at the same time, I just had to figure out, the person I thought I was reporting to is no longer there. There was no one giving guidance. The other person who was going to supervise my role was gone for 3 months. And here was my start date. So I just thought, okay, I'm going to try and work out what you all want me to do and do some observations, conversations, and I make sure to write a monthly report. So no matter what, there's a record of something I'm doing. But a person working over in injury management came over to my desk and said, hi, I hear you're now doing some work design, human factors, ergonomics kind of work. I said, yeah. Are you here to put me out of a job? Stood over me and said that to me. I said, wow.
Okay, that's not your mentor.
That was a final note to self, not my mentor. So actually, I kind of said, wow, wouldn't that be awesome if we effectively eliminated so many causes for injuries, right, that you and I could work together in a constructive way to build and construct more health and well-being throughout the organization and more innovation. That would be awesome, and I look forward to that opportunity. And I thought, wow, Sarah, you have to think fast there. I was actually proud of my quick response. I wanted to say, F's sake, did you really just say that to me?
Rite of passage.
Rite of passage. Tough love. Let's see if you can get past this person. So sometimes there's those personalities. Let's see if you can deal with, Joe over here or Jane over there, right? Because that's part of the rite of passage in this organization.
Yeah, it clearly was. Yeah, it's definitely. So again, falls back to communication.
I think we actually need to dismantle some of these rites of passage. I think we need to bring them up. Now, you talked about primal urges, and should we just talk about that sex is really a thing in an organization, meaning that there are aspects of like precarious manhood. Are you threatening somebody's manhood, therefore they get very violent or aggressive, and do they act as a bully in the workplace, right? And just as an example, I think it behooves us to go back and examine what are our rites of passage if we are looking at education or if we're looking at our workplace, and are we brave enough to dissect these and say, are these really useful, or are they possibly creating harm now? What's our objective? Going back to that human factors analysis, what are we trying to communicate? How do humans receive that? What mode? How are they supposed to process information? What behaviors do we expect to follow? And are we really doing things the right way? And so I think it's more than just saying, hey, we probably I don't think people know so much what these invisible rites of passage are until we pause to reflect and dissect them, pull them apart actively, reconstruct it.
That's the elephant in the room. Who's got the courage to do it?
Why is it an elephant in the room? Who's got the courage to do it?
You've been listening to Trajce, Sara and Alan, and if you really enjoyed this show, share this with a friend. Submit your 5-star rating on your favourite podcast streaming service. Keep listening and send in your stories. You can email us at hello@whywork.com.au, and of course sign in to our newsletter. You can head straight to our website at www.whywork.com.au. We can't wait to learn about the trouble you've seen in the workplace. And remember, none of the things we've talked about today should be construed as legal advice or any other type of advice. We're just here to talk about all things related to work, and we hope you enjoyed as much as we do. We love it. See you next time.